I'm the Program Director of Literary Programs and Emerging Voices at PEN America. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's edition of PEN Out Loud, featuring Robert Jones Jr. and Mateo Askaripour. New York Times-bestselling author Robert Jones Jr. is a writer from New York City. He received his BFA in creative writing and MFA in fiction from Brooklyn College. The Prophets is his debut novel, and it was a finalist for the 2021 National Book Award for Fiction. Mateo Askaripour's work aims to empower people of color to seize opportunities for advancement, no matter the obstacle. His debut novel, Black Buck, was an instant New York Times bestseller and a Read with Jenna Today Show book club pick. He lives in Brooklyn. Links to full bios are in the chat. Special thanks to our series partners, the Strand Book Store, as well as Scripps Presents, the public programming series at Scripps College in Claremont, California. We also want to thank ProBono ASL for providing interpretation, including tonight's interpreters, Tim Mills and Mac McClendon. PEN America's mission is to unite writers and readers to celebrate creative expression and freedom to write for all. PEN Out Loud is a year-round conversation series featuring a diversity of voices, including authors, poets, journalists, artists, and activists. Tonight, we celebrate Robert Jones Jr. and the paperback publication of The Prophets. A thoroughly researched novel, it tells the love story between two enslaved men and the endurance of their relationship amid increasing tensions on the plantation where they live. In a 2021 PEN 10 interview, Robert Jones Jr. was asked about the relationship between truth and fiction, to which he responded by evoking Miss Toni Morrison, going on to say, "The best fiction reveals the answer to us by running parallel to reality, highlighting or uncovering things we might have missed because we are preoccupied, apathetic, traumatized, or in a state of complete denial." It is my opinion that The Prophets is a testament to the best of fiction, and I cannot wait for this discussion. Following the conversation, Mateo Askaripour will moderate a brief Q&A. Please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. Links to purchase books by our featured authors will be in the chat too. With that, thank you again for joining us, and let's begin the conversation. And I hand it over to Mateo and Robert.
Robert, my brother.
How are you, Mateo? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well now that I'm seeing you, man. For us, this is just regular. We speak oftentimes every day, if not at least once or twice a week. You're in what I think is your living room. Is that your living room?
This is my office.
Your office. Okay.
Yes.
I'm in my living room, which is also my library, which is also my kitchen, which is also my writing space.
That is the life of people who live in Brooklyn.
That's right.
Especially in Crown Heights.
That's right.
Like that.
I don't know who lives in Crown Heights. I don't know who lives there, but I would agree. I've been to some places in Crown Heights, but I don't know anyone that lives there. Congrats to you, man, on the release of your paperback. Utmost respect for writing a book that has touched so many people. I mean, how are you feeling? Like that your book is here, not just out, but out in paperback now?
First of all, thank you for that, and congratulations to you. Your book came out in paperback last month. Yes.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Congratulations.
How
does it feel? That's a good question, because I'm not sure. One of the things I realized about promoting a book during the pandemic is that you're once removed from every experience. And so while I can hold the book in my hand and touch it and feel like the textured cover, because they used a really great grade of paper for the cover, if you can feel like ridges kind of like on it, it's hard to understand what that means in the reality outside, because I have not done very many in-person book events. I would say like 90%, maybe 95% of my touring has been virtual.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know. I don't know how to answer that question other than to say that it feels whatever it must feel like to be in limbo. That's what it feels like.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, no, I can relate, man. This feeling of suspension, because it's so different than what has come before, even though, at least for myself, and I believe for you, you know, we haven't had the traditional experience, but you've been writing for a minute. So I'm sure that for over a decade, maybe two, you know, I know that it took you about 13 to 14 years to write The Prophets, but I'm sure that you were in the literary world or adjacent to it, or had some proximity to it for longer than that, so that you got to see firsthand and in person what it was like for an author to publish their book. But running it back a little bit, everyone who's here, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming here. And this is probably the first and last time I'll speak for Robert. I know Robert appreciates it too. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A function, because for the next 30 to 40 minutes, Robert and I are just going to be kicking it. and you all are going to witness. We're going to be doing our own dance, a little freestyle back and forth, just as we would via the phone, via text, via voice memos, or an Instagram live. So Robert, right, you're talking about not knowing how it feels to have a book published paperback, right? But what about the description of the book and your intentions with it? Because when I think about your book, The Prophets, and I'm sure that there are many people here who have read it, but a few who haven't, an oversimplification would be, at its core, in my opinion, is that it's a love story. And it's about the lengths that people will go to maintain love, and that others will go in order to destroy it. So a two-pronged question is, how are you describing it when it first came out, and has it changed at all a year later?
That's a great question too. My elevator pitch had been, you know, The Prophets is the story of Samuel and Isaiah, two enslaved young men on a plantation in the Deep South during antebellum slavery, who fall in love, and how that love transforms, angers, inspires everyone around them. But as you said, that's in a nutshell. But I'm coming to understand from my conversations with other people, from readers who give me their feedback on the book, from listening to bookstagrammers discuss my book, that it's about so much more than that. It is about connecting the diaspora across distances. It is about paying homage to our ancestors. It is about liberation. It is about a life lived outside and against the white gaze. It is so many different things, but I know for marketing purposes, we have to kind of sum it up. But it's in many ways like a quilt or a tapestry that attempts to give us just enough of the lives of Black people globally to understand who we are and where we come from.
Have you, and thank you for that, have you changed up your pitch in any way? I'm asking because in my own experience, you're talking about what you learn about your book from conversations with others. For me, right, in terms of my novel, I wrote it, and before it came out, I was like, yo, it doesn't matter what kind of interview I get in, I'm good. I was intentional about like 95, 98% of it. I was crossing my T's, dotting my I's. People could say whatever they want. They could ask me anything. I'm going to have an answer. That's not how it went. That's not how it went on me. Sometimes people would ask a question, and then I'd be like, and over time, I realized that though I believed I was intentional about and that was bad overzealous, right? Though I believed I was intentional about 95, 98% of things, over the past year, that number has dropped to like 80, 83%, where people had brought things up to me that I wasn't aware of, that my vision couldn't see. And I was so grateful to learn more, as you said, about my book and myself as a writer through my interactions with others. So have there been a few of those moments, and if you feel comfortable sharing, maybe one or two, where you had a conversation with someone about something regarding the prophets, or even yourself as a writer, maybe even yourself as a human, that you said, I didn't think about that before, but now I'm going to internalize that and carry that with me moving forward?
The only thing that I can think of offhand is my experience with continental Africans who read the prophets, and the importance of the chapters in the prophets that illuminate pre-colonial African societies. See, a lot of that was research, but there was so little research for me to go on at the time that I was writing this book that some of it is imagined, based on, just instinct, blood memory. And when speaking to people in South Africa who have handed it off to people in Zimbabwe, who then handed it off to people in Kenya, who then handed it off to people in Nigeria, because South Africa is the only African country in which the prophets is available, for reasons that deal with the sociopolitics of the book. And then having those individuals contact me through social media to say, you gave me the argument that I do belong, that all of this stuff that I've been taught about myself, about my existence, is a lie, and that we've been cut off from the truth, and you've given me something to move back to, made me think about the ways in which I need to talk more about the African parts of this book, because they too are essential. They're not many. There are relatively few of those chapters compared to Samuel and Isaiah and the plantation in Mississippi. But those chapters are vital. And I don't often get to talk about them. I don't often get asked about them. But I realize that they are, in a sense, the glue that holds this book together. Those are the chapters that give the prophets its rootedness in truth, that give it, I think, a grander scope. And so when I was initially talking about the book, I focused a great deal on Samuel and Isaiah. But just as important to this narrative are Samuel and Isaiah's precursor, Kosai and Alewa. And, I have not read the prophets since it's been published. Like, I'll read excerpts for events.
Yeah.
But I can't bring myself to read the book again, because all I see are the flaws, the mistakes, the things that I want to revise. But when I do dive back in just to quickly look at something, I find that it's the African chapters that I feel are most well written. The ones that I look at and say, who wrote that? That was good. So yeah.
So many thoughts. One being that I also haven't read my book since it came out. I don't know if I ever will. Again, I mean, I hope that you all read the prophets, of course, even if Robert, doesn't want to dive back into it. Please tell your friends, tell everyone, tell strangers, tell your enemies, tell everyone to read the book. But I feel you on that, man, 100%. The second thing that comes to mind is when I was reading the book and I came across that first chapter, right, that was taking place in Africa, on the continent, I said, whoa, what is Robert doing here? If I can speak personally, about my experience, it was soothing in a way, a balm of sorts, because as you stated, the majority of the novel is taking place during enslavement in Mississippi on this plantation, where brutal acts are taking place and are happening, and also being committed by people there. Right. Very well knowing, you and I, as people who grew up in this nation and people who have looked into our own history, you could have included so much more to the reality of what our forebears, whether in this nation or in the diaspora, had experienced. So when I read that first chapter that was taking place on the continent before enslavement, I was so excited. It felt like a journey into a land of intrigue, of excitement. You had a line in there about how not all of us were kings. Most of us were just regular people or royal subjects. I loved that line when you're like, yo, not everyone was a king. Matthew would be like, we were kings back in the day. Not, homie. Your ancestor was more likely, hunting or building the cabins or whatever cabins, whatever the dwellings, you know what I'm saying? Or a potter, or they could have just been doing nothing. And that doesn't take away from their humanity. So I want to ask, why did you put those in there? When you could have just, I have mad questions. I'm not trying to break my own rule of asking one question at a time. So let me be more thoughtful. You said that those chapters were the most well-written. Why? Like, this is me from a craft perspective. What do you define as something that's well-written? Because I thought the whole book was well-written.
Thank you for that. As a writer, I'm never satisfied. I think, and I've said this before, that the curse of being a writer is that you're always a better writer today than you were yesterday, but never as good today as you will be tomorrow. And so me personally, I'm always chasing tomorrow. I'm one of those writers who is often stuck in a state of revision, because I'll write something today and be like, I like that line. And then tomorrow when I read it, I'll like, I hate that line.
Same line.
Same line. Yeah. And so even Toni Morrison said she reread The Bluest Eye and saw the flaws and saw the things that she would change and saw the characters she would give more depth and, all of that, those sorts of things. So I think that's just the nature of writing. But in terms of the African chapters and why I think they're the best written is because they sort of don't rely, like I can be free of the weight of being African American in those chapters, at least at the start. When I'm writing as a Black writer in America, there's always this weight of menace from all the people who wish me harm because I'm Black. And then all the people who wish me harm because I'm queer. And writing against that flow, like sort of like snowboarding up the mountain instead of down.
I can tell you've never snowboarded. And I'm saying this because you and I text about it.
That's the only reason why I'm using snowboarding, is because you are the first Black person I know that ever has snowboarded. And that is the most important thing to me, because like you sent me the video and stuff, and people were snowboarding off of roofs. And
you said this dude snowboards for real.
When I'm writing as an African American, and hopefully with the next novel, I'm not going to have to do this. But with this in particular, because of the subject matter, I was writing against the grain of the history of this country, which, as we've seen, the history of this country is erasure. It tries to lie about what has happened. It wants to mythologize everything. And so I have to write back into reality the truth. And that is a burden. But when I'm writing about this African village and these African people who have not yet encountered whiteness and don't know what whiteness is and don't know what it can do or what it does, it's just arms wide open. Yeah. It's just like, I could imagine anything. I could fly if I want to. You know, Toni Morrison famously said in Song of Solomon, you put down all that shit that's holding you down and then you can fly. Yep. You know? And that's what it felt like in writing those African chapters. It felt like I was flying. And at some point it was almost as though, and this was for the whole book, ancestors were speaking through me. But in those chapters in particular, it was ancestors free of the shackles of slavery. And I think in allowing myself that space, that freedom, that flight, the language, the writing did the same thing. It flew.
Yeah. I'll also say, and maybe this is the last time for this conversation, I'll comment on those chapters. I butted up against the limitations of my own experience and my own ability to break my mind open. Those chapters broke me open just due to the sheer language. When you were talking about the different genders and the expressions, and I was having to keep up with all of it because I have been trained and I have been socialized to think of things in certain ways, despite me viewing myself as very open, right? So those chapters, though, when you had the queen or the king, but then they were this, and then they had this, and I was like, hold up, Robert, what are you doing right now? And again, I think that the whole novel was innovative, not in terms of imaginative, like fantastical, right? This was real. This is real life for so many people. But I thought that those portions, especially related to Africa and what you were doing there and how free you were actually flying in them, were just so impactful and necessary.
But what I also realized is that I could do something like what you did with Black Buck too. I can fly at home by using breaking out of the genre and trying to comment on it at the same time.
Yeah.
To use absurdity and humor and biting criticism hidden beneath the humor to make a point. And that too is a type of flight.
I agree. Oh, I definitely felt free when writing my novel. And I was also just like, you know, we'll see what happens, but I know what I'm doing. And then I ideally, at least some people who I have in mind while writing the book will feel what I'm doing as well. And that goes into my next question. You were talking about the burden of writing as an African-American and Black person and Black man in this nation and having to go against the grain in a way. How, if any way, did fear play into the construction of the prophets?
Fear played a primary role, actually. Just today on Instagram, the author of The Shadow King, Maaza Mengiste, she gave a talk where she said, if a white man writes a novel that is experimental and tries new things, audiences are more willing to accept that. But if a Black person tries to do the same thing, it's suspicious, and people are their reaction is, why would they do this? Like, how dare they? You know, who do they think they are? I felt that in writing this book. I felt it. I instinctively thought that would be the reaction because I was writing a book that I had not read before.
Yeah.
And part of that was confirmed even in some of the reviews of the book that said, this is a well-written book, but like, I don't understand why he's doing this, that, and the third. And it's just like, you might not understand on the first read.
Yeah.
You might not understand on the second read. But just like you give F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Joan Didion and all these people license to do whatever the hell they want to do in these books.
Yeah.
Give me license. You're already trying to put me in a box and trying to present my experimentation as failure or as flaw. Things that if my name was, name any white boy writer who is writing things right now, you would have been like, genius. And the thing that is, I'm not assigning intentionality to the people who do that. They don't even know they're doing it because it's so instinctive in white majority countries to look at Black literature as something that is beneath, to question its validity immediately. In this country, the history of Black literature is a white person had to put a letter at the beginning to say, I testify and attest to the validity of what this Black person is saying. In those days, they didn't use the word Black person. And to this day, there's still a sense that there needs to be a white person to co-sign on the validity of a Black person's creativity in a myriad of ways. And I reject it. I accept that you think my work, whatever I'm doing in this novel, is flawed or mistaken or bad or whatever. I accept that you think that. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Maybe you'll catch up.
Sheesh. Maybe they'll catch up if they're lucky. Robert, that makes me think about expectations, right? I want to ask if you assumed that going into it. It sounds like you did, but again, I don't want to assume so. So I'll ask open-endedly, what were some expectations you had going into the publication of The Prophets, and what are some that were defied or upended over the last year?
You know, at the beginning of this process, when I first started writing The Prophets, like in 2006, I had the dream that every writer, I think, has. I want to win a Pulitzer. I want to win a National Book Award. I want to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. I want to, all the things that I've been told are the things that mark you as a successful writer. New York Times bestseller list, millions of copies sold, those are the things that were my expectations or were my dreams. I don't have to tell you which one of those have not come to pass.
You got a couple of them. You got a couple of them, brother.
Almost all of them have not come to pass.
You got a couple. Come on.
But listen.
I'm here.
What I realized is that it's such a miracle that this book got published.
Facts.
I owe a great deal of thanks to PJ Mark, my agent at Janklow and Nesbitt.
Yo, shout out to PJ. I don't know PJ, but I know the people that PJ represents, and PJ is that guy.
Kiese Lehman, Donnie Walton, come on.
My man Irvin Weathersby.
Irvin,
yeah.
Come on. Shout out to PJ Mark at Janklow and Nesbitt, to Sally Kim and Ivan Held at Putnam. Because here's this book by a Black queer writer that has no white savior in it. In fact, upends the idea of white saviorism.
Yep.
That critiques Christianity, that presents and treats its Black characters with full dimensionality and humanity, that puts a Black queer couple, and not just a Black queer couple, but Black queer love at the dead center of the book, and is about liberation and an uprising. Who's going to read this book? Like, I've offended 90% of the population already.
Mm.
And those three people, PJ Mark, Sally Kim, and Ivan Held, said, we believe in your work. This book is so well written that we will take the risk of publishing this book and putting it out into the world. And it has offended a great number of people, even the ones that don't come right out and say it like up front that they're offended by this book. You can tell in the surreptitious shit that they're saying that they're offended by the book. But it exists. That's the gift. I no longer have any other expectations except wow, this book actually got published. How the gatekeepers didn't keep this book from being published because it is everything that they detest is a miracle. And I have three people to thank for that miracle.
Wow. So then what does being a National Book Award finalist symbolize to you, right? Because you said that you had the dreams of a Pulitzer, of the National Book Award, of millions of copies. I'm sure you had some other dreams and dreams that are likely in process right now. You know, I love seeing when you post or share photos of beautiful men who could play Samuel, Isaiah, or someone else. And your captions, mercy. You write, Lord of mercy. Yeah. Every time I see that, I'm like, Robert. So right there are dreams that are in the process and dreams that I'm confident will come to fruition. In fact, I know stuff is going on, maybe things that you can't say right now. So everyone watching, stay tuned, please, for more from the prophets. Again, going back to the National Book Award, you and I, not to share too much of our private conversations, but you and I were discussing the likelihood. You and I were speaking the day before the announcement, and we were discussing about the likelihood of either of us, you know, being longlisted or anything like that, what it would mean and this, that, and the other. And then the next day I woke up and I saw that you were there and I texted you like immediately. And I don't know if you had just seen it. I don't know how much time had passed, but I texted you immediately. So happy, right? And then you weren't only longlisted, but you were shortlisted, right? You were shortlisted out of all of the fiction books, the National Book Award being one of the preeminent literary prizes in the world. So what did it mean to you to not just be longlisted, but to be a finalist, especially when you had written something that, as you said, 90 or however many people could and likely would have detested?
That too, I found to be miraculous. I did not expect to be longlisted. I did not expect to be a finalist. I was pleased as punch when Jason Mott won, because he and I talked before that. And like you and I, you know, I reached out to him and I said, brother, listen, either one of us win this, it's for the culture. And I'm good. And he won and I was good. But I realized that that's not my ministry.
Awards?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not my ministry. My ministry is to tell the truth no matter what. My ministry is to try to be as good a writer as I possibly can while I'm still doing this. And my time is limited, brother. I was diagnosed with MS in 2019. Just this past New Year's, I had an awful MS flare-up that scared the shit out of me because it really, I did not anticipate being debilitated in the way that I was. So I realized that there's a clock ticking for how much longer I'm going to be able to do the thing that I'm doing. So I can't be concerned about whether I write something and some committee on the awards thinks that this is good or bad or not or whatever, I used to be consumed by that. I used to think that was where my value was, that if I didn't win this award, then I was not a good writer. That is not true. I'm a good writer because I say so. I'm a good writer because I write, because if I don't, I'll explode. I'm a good writer because I put in my 10,000 hours and then some. I'm a good writer because it is my purpose. I am not the first writer in my family. I come from a generation of writers, so it's in my blood. I'm a good writer because I can't not be. And no one can confirm or deny that for me. Only I can do that. And so it was a blessing and a miracle that the National Book Awards saw enough value in my work that they considered The Prophets as a finalist in their judgment. And thank you to all the other awards that chose The Prophets on their long list or on their short list, or didn't choose The Prophets at all. Thank you. But my goal is the next book has to be better than The Prophets. And if I'm lucky enough to write another book after that, that book has to be better than the second. James Baldwin said it plainly. All I want to be is an honest man and a good writer.
What does being better mean?
Being better for me means that if I'm looking at the books that I write, that I can see the growth from one to the next in terms of my skill as a writer. And I use the term skill because a friend of mine told me, Torrin Clark, he's an artist. He's a dope artist too. His poster just went up in Manhattan of the Black Batman.
Okay.
And he told me, because I said, my talent or whatever. He's like, nah, bro, you don't have talent, you have skill. Because skill is something you worked at. You put in your time for this. And so I want to be able to see from The Prophets to the next work, and if Ancestors willing, the work after that, that I've grown as a writer and a thinker, that my compassion is exponentially getting larger with every project, that I am answering the question that I set out to find the answer to in each of those works, and that I'm becoming more skilled at doing so. That for me is how I can tell. So the truth is, I won't know until I know.
Yeah. No, I feel you. It's just, you brought up better. And for me, I'm curious, right? I'm always curious about any individual, not even just writer or artist or what have you, but what their measuring stick is for success and also growth and improvement in their craft. It helps me better understand and better contextualize what I'm doing. So when you get there, I mean, you and I are going to talk anyway. Maybe you'll bless me with being able to see a draft or something of your next joint.
What about your next joint though?
Oh, we're working on it, man. We're working on it. Yeah. For me, I need to always take a risk, and growth as a person and as a writer and also as an artist, because I do branch out beyond writing and plan to continue doing so. It means taking bigger risks, right? With Black Buck, my novel, there were many people who were feeling it. There are many other iterations of that novel that I've written in terms of using that same voice for other projects, whether it be an essay, whether it be a short story. The strange thing for me is many people like that voice and want to pay for it in other regards. So it would be easy for me to stick with that voice and some of the similar themes for my next novels. And I have ideas that conform to that, but I'm not writing those books yet, because I didn't come in this to just make a check or to just give people what they want. I came in this to grow, to hopefully reach people in new and original ways, and to inspire, but also, again, to take risks and see if I can rise to the occasion. That's what excites me. The way that I write, I don't just wait for inspiration to hit. I'm writing almost every weekday. I have a routine. So for me to stay engaged, I need to be excited about what I'm doing. So yeah, with the second book, it is more ambitious than Black Buck. It is far, far greater in scope. And you let me know, brother, if I land the plane when we get there. I didn't know that you came from generations of writers. If you could take a few minutes to speak on that, I'd love to learn more about the history of your ancestors and the literary blood in you.
You know, I only recently found that out, and when I say recently, I mean in the last 5 to 7 years.
Word.
That on my father's side of the family, on the Jones side of my family, I have a cousin Jamel who's a writer. I have my uncle who passed away as a writer. My great uncle Herbert was a writer. And I was just like, really? All of these writers in my family, I guess this is where it comes from. And the very first person to give me something that inspired me to write was my father. He gave me a Wonder Woman comic when I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And that's all she wrote. Like after that, I wanted to now learn how to write so I could tell my own stories.
Yeah.
So the Jones side of my family was very much writerly.
What was your mother's like maiden last name?
Benjamin.
Benjamin. I don't know why that question has popped in my mind. I was curious.
And my aunt actually traced back all the way to the Caribbean, the slave owners that owned us. It was a Jewish family from Europe that owned my family, and we took the last name Benjamin.
But there's
a famous Jewish family that
there's a relation to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Are we related?
We're different island, but
okay.
Benjamin comes from my family that's from St. Kitts.
Okay.
So my grandfather's parents, Ebenezer and Louisa.
Those are some old ass names.
Ebenezer. My great grandfather's name was Ebenezer, dude.
Wow.
And he was born in St. Kitts.
Man, this is a whole nother conversation for another time. But when I found out the name of the man that owned my family in Jamaica, my mother's maiden name is Case. And through research, I found this man named Joseph Case that owned my family in the parish of St. Anne on a plantation called Egypt. And there are ledgers of cattle and of the people, a few, if not all of which were likely my forebears. It's something strange, man. It's something strange when you find that out. And then when you even speak it into existence, like now, that's a whole nother thing. But, you and I will discuss that another time. One question before we get into Q&A. And again, anyone who has questions, please drop them into the Q&A. The fine brother, Jared Jackson, will be dropping them into our chat so that I can moderate. But last question is, I aspire to being a writer of the people. Respect to other writers, sure, but in many ways I couldn't care less about them, just to keep it real, because I didn't come into this industry in the traditional modes. I didn't make it through being in with people on Twitter, even though, let me not front, I tried and it didn't work. I try to fashion myself as a writer of the people. And you are my brother in that we care about readers, even if they haven't read our book, with one of our primary forms of interacting with them being Instagram.
Right.
So why is that important for you? If it is at all, maybe I'm just assuming, but why, if it is important for you to interact with readers in general?
I would like to think that I'm writing for me. Mm-hmm. That when I'm writing these books, there's a question that I need an answer to, or there's a situation that I think needs correction or explanation. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, without community, it's just an echo chamber. I'm alone, and it's a different form of silence. And the community I want, though, I want to curate.
Yeah. Same.
I don't want just a community of everyone. And I don't mean I want to curate it so that I'm just basically creating a community of people that just think only like me and only think I'm great.
Yeah.
I want a community of people who don't mean me harm. And I find, especially on Bookstagram, with people like Akili and Reggie and Jayana and Nia and Crystal and so many others, a community of people who want to engage me, who don't think I'm like Jesus or anything like that, who have quarrels with my work, but in a way that's healthy and inspiring and loving. And so, yes, I love myself, but I also want to find love in community, and with a community who can understand and share this art that I'm sharing with the world.
Yeah.
So that is why that audience is important to me.
Preach, man. I'm right there with you. Transitioning to a couple audience questions. Okay. Supposedly this is for both of us. You are at very different stages of your lives, but share debut author status. How do you feel you are connected and learn from each other? Wow. Well, damn, this one's good.
How Mateo and I met was that I was on Goodreads and I saw that his book and my book were coming out on the same day. And I read the synopsis of his book. I immediately pre-ordered it and then read the synopsis of his book. What drew me to it was by a Black author. And I said, let me read up on this guy, Mateo. Found out he was from Brooklyn or lived in Brooklyn. And I reached out to him on Twitter and I said, brother, you don't know me, but our books are coming out on the same day. And I just want to wish you the best of luck. I hope we both make the New York Times bestseller list, blah, 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 blah. And Mateo said exactly the same, brother. And from that moment, it was just like brotherhood.
Yeah.
Nothing but brotherhood. And then we met in person. We've only met in person twice, even though it feels like we've known each other for a much longer time than that.
Yeah.
It was instant love, instant chemistry. So what I think we have in common is a couple of things, actually. Love of the word, love of our people, love of the craft. And Mateo has such a distinct point of view. Like, I'm not reading any other writer that is writing like Mateo, that is thinking like Mateo, that is going to the places that Mateo is going. I'd like to think that maybe I'm like that too, but I'm not sure. But Mateo is definitely that.
Man, this one, it's really, I can only echo what Robert said. We connected off rip immediately. There was no pretense. There was no weird dancing around. It was like we had known each other for the majority of our lives. Like we were really brothers. And over the last year, that's just been proven to each other. I think one of the main things that I appreciate about Robert is the fact that he can be completely vulnerable with me and I can be completely vulnerable with him. We never have to be on. We check in with each other. Our interactions are based in love, where if I had just met Robert at a party somehow, or we had maybe met, in a grocery store and he was a rocket scientist and I was a skateboarder, I could see myself still rolling to his crib every Saturday for a cup of coffee or something, right? And I mean to say that we are not solely joined through being authors. There's something greater going on. So I can't appreciate Robert enough. And thank you for the question so that I could publicly share some love and show some love for my brother right there. And what's crazy is we've known each other for a year, but it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. Second question is, Actually, let me back up though, because I will say that I had peeped that Robert and I both had books coming out on the same day. And I was like, no, when I found that out, because I said, yo, I had like peeped a little bit about this guy, Robert, son of Baldwin, and they were moving up my release date. They moved it up a few months, and it was going to be January 12th. And I said, all right, bet, because I see that this guy, Robert, has his book coming out on the 5th, and his is going to blow, no doubt. Not just because I can tell that this guy is wonderful and has a great following, but because he's writing a book that has been on my mind for years, but I'm not the one to write it. But a book I've been curious that no one has ever written about something so obvious, right? Again, at its core being about love, but superficially almost two queer enslaved men on a plantation. Very basic premise, yet we have never seen any book to tackle that. It's crazy. 2022 now, came out 2021. Robert began writing it, a decade and a half prior. So for us to then connect and become brothers was great, because I had already wished him well before we had interacted via Twitter. But I was definitely like a little shook. I'm not gonna front. I was like, good Lord, there's no chance I'm making the list now. But we both made the list, for what it's worth, even though I know that we define success differently today. Okay, second question. Robert, your acknowledgments in your book touched my heart so much and truly speaks to the work you have done with your platform, Son of Baldwin. What is it to dedicate yourself to informing the world about the injustices and challenges that we as a nation face every day?
Beautifully exhausting.
Woo!
That's what it's like. There is a kind of beauty in being able to use my intellect and my skill and my art in service to justice, fairness, equity. But there is also a level of exhaustion that I have to. We are in the 21st century and people still have to be told, you should sort of not be cruel to other people. Like Neanderthals was how many thousands of years ago, and we're still trying to get it together as a species that harm is wrong, that harming each other is wrong. Like that's I thought we learned that in kindergarten. So there is a level of exhaustion. But I have to say, I also find inspiration in that challenge of writing from a space in which I am occupying these marginalized identities. So beautifully exhausting.
Well put, and I'm not surprised. Last question. We have many, but for the sake of time, you've just quoted Morrison, and I see the photo of James Baldwin over your right shoulder, Mr. Jones Jr. I am an avid fan of your Facebook page and wanted to know other writers, musicians, figures, foods that enable you to put the, and here's a bunch of gibberish, but the shit down and fly. I appreciate the precision, and the generosity you have shared in this exchange.
Okay. Let's see. Other writers. There are so many. Chinua Achebe, Gloria Naylor, Alice Walker, Octavia Butler, Toni Cade Bambara, Wallace Thurman, Zora Neale Hurston, and also the writers that I am writing alongside, Mateo Askaripour, Donnie Walton, Disha Philyaw, Kiese Lehman, Dontiel Moniz. There are just Dante Stewart. There are so many. I feel like I'm writing in a Black Renaissance. There's so many exceptional, beautiful, brilliant Black people writing right now, right this instant, that I feel so blessed to be writing during this time. It is just incredible. Musicians, Janet,
always,
D'Angelo, Prince, Maxwell, Sade.
Yo, give me a rapper. Give me a rapper, Robert. I never heard you talk about rapper.
Inspires me. Most Def.
Okay.
Gam, let me think.
You had mentioned, I feel like you had mentioned some non-male rappers once on social media that you were going in about. Do you like Missy?
God, Missy Elliott, Busta Rhymes.
Okay.
Two of the most creative rappers that have ever existed.
Bet.
There's a woman from England named Lady
Lee Sure.
Yo, she
does her one-take videos. She's ill. She's ill.
My God, so many. Again, and then of course the classics, people like Luther Vandross, Shaka Khan, Donny Hathaway, so many to name. Foods. What foods inspire me? I'm actually on a special diet because of the multiple sclerosis. So I have cut out so many things like grains, dairy, processed sugar, yada, 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 down the list. But foods that make me feel creative come from either my Southern background, like, chicken, collard greens, things like that, or
chitlins.
Chicken. I can't stand chitlins. Chitlins smell like doo-doo.
I grew up eating tripe. I loved it.
That's stomach, right?
Yeah, the intestine, the lining, the stomach.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
But my husband, as you know, is Jamaican. He can't stand tripe.
Brethren.
And then I'm also a huge fan of Caribbean food. So you give me some escovitch fish, which your mother owes me.
She's here.
Some jerk chicken, which your mother owes me. And I am Bammy. I need some Bammy. And I'm good.
Word. What's your favorite shape?
My favorite shape?
Yeah. Let me throw out some wild ones right now. We got a minute.
A circle.
A circle. What's your favorite word?
My favorite word. Oh, wow. Bliss.
What's your favorite sound?
A baby's laughter.
Wow. Wow. Damn. Last one. What's your favorite smell?
Oh, my favorite smell is rain.
I thought you were gonna say Subway in the summer. Ooh, de Subway. Robert, first of all, shout out to everyone at Penn and the Strand. You all in the audience, thank you for joining us this evening again. Just my brother and I chopping it up for an hour with all of you, and we appreciate your questions. This is part of the Penn Out Loud series, and you can check out the rest of their events on penn.org. The next event is between Julie Otsuka and Nicole Chung for Otsuka's, first novel in over a decade, The Swimmers. Robert, honored that you would invite me to share space with you. Thank you for all that you do for me and that all you do for the world of literature, brother, not just with the written word, but also for who you are. I love you, man. Thank you.
I love you, Mateo. Thank you so much for agreeing to this. Thank you to Penn, to Strand, to Scripps. It's an honor, always.
Be blessed, everyone. Peace.